From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Hey, good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast, Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. A packed show for all of y'all today because we're catching up on what we missed on Patch Tuesday. So yesterday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, kind of the news starts coming down over what's happening in patches. And so we're doing that recap today. But just one thing, you know, what a few members of the security gang here were kind of like, hey, maybe you should do a special show at 2 p.m. on Patch Tuesday. Not a bad idea. We may end up doing that, right? Kind of as the patches drop, talk them over together, the whole nine, as they kind of get out there. So not saying that's not a bad idea. I mean, our audience, I think, has the best ideas in the industry. So by general rule of thumb, I'd say, you know, it's not a bad idea. So again, not in the studio this morning, traveling. I'll be back in the studio hopefully tomorrow. Flying today in our country is you know, kind of a gamble of whether or not you're going to make it anywhere on time. Although Delta is pretty good at doing just that, but I don't want to open my mouth to the devil, so I'm going to knock on the wood that I've got here because I want to make it home tonight. All right. So with that being said, let's get into what's happening on the Patch Tuesday today. For all of y'all tuning in today, coffee cup, cheers. Enjoy your cup of coffee because I'm pre-recording the show, obviously, because I'm traveling and the whole nine. But if you've got a cup of coffee, enjoy it, savor it, because good coffee when you're traveling is hard to come by. All right, coffee cup, cheers. Let's get the show on board and running, folks. Let's kick it off with, you know, my favorite Patch Tuesday company, and probably yours too. Starts with an M, ends with a T, and it's got Microsoft in there. Microsoft. All right. So Microsoft typically kind of leads Patch Tuesday. So from a flaw perspective, it wasn't bad yesterday. 57 flaws. I mean, just last month, it was like 100 and something. The month before that was 80 something. 57, the lowest of the quarter. You would think Microsoft does that to you. It's kind of like, you know, when you're using Teams and, you know, you're trying to connect and it just doesn't always connect, or all of a sudden it kicks off all your drivers and you've got to reload all your drivers, or your microphone doesn't work, even though you've got a really nice mic and you've got to use your, you know, laptop microphone because for some reason it doesn't want to pick up your soundboard and nice microphone that you've invested so much money on. Okay, I'm getting distracted here. All right. But 57 flaws. 23 of which were elevation of privilege vulnerabilities, 3 security feature bypass, 23 remote code execution vulnerabilities, 4 information disclosure, 1 denial of service, and 3 spoofing vulnerabilities. Wow, that's great. Nope. 6 actively exploited 0 days. 6, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6. It's what I, you know, when I'm playing with my 3-year-old, it's kind of the game we play. Like, how many are here? This isn't 1, this isn't 2, this isn't 3, and he's counting, right? So a little bit of sense of humor this morning. 6 different 0 days. Let's get into what those are. So CVE 2025-24983 is a Windows Win32 kernel subsystem elevation privilege vulnerability. They're not sure how the flaw was being exploited. However, it was discovered by Philippe Jourquot with ESET. And there'll likely be more about it as it gets patched up. They probably don't want the exploit out there for everyone to do that. CVE 2025-24984, a Windows NTFS information disclosure vulnerability. They say this can be exploited with those who have physical access to the device and insert a malicious USB drive. So, I mean, this is where I would rank this. Like, yes, it's an exploited 0 day, but you got to have physical access to the device, meaning I'm having a really, really bad day if someone is doing that. So, you know, again, take that for what it is. CVE 2025-24985, a Windows Fast Fat file, system drive remote code execution vulnerabilities. Windows says that this is caused by an integer overflow or wraparound in Windows Fast Fat driver that, when exploited, would allow an attacker to execute code. You can trick a local user on a vulnerable system into mounting a specially crafted VHD that would then trigger the vulnerability. They haven't shared about how it's being exploited, but malicious VHD images were previously distributed in some phishing attacks and through some pirated software websites, so that's likely where this is getting exploited. CVE 2025-24991 is a Windows NTFS information disclosure vulnerability. And again, this exploit allows to read small portions of heap memory and steal that information. And again, this could be tricked with the VHD file as well. Microsoft says these two vulnerabilities around the NTFS were disclosed anonymously. CVE 2025-24999-3, a Windows NTFS red code execution vulnerability. Again, similar to the NTFS, there an attacker could trick a local user to on a vulnerable system and mounting that specially crafted VHD. Again, disclosed anonymously as well. So 3 different ones there on the Microsoft NTFS. And then CVE 2025-26633, a management council security feature bypass vulnerability. Microsoft has not shared details on this flaw, but based on its description, it involves a bug that allows malicious Microsoft management council files bypass Windows security features and execute code. In any case, an attacker would have no way to force a user to view attacker-controlled content. So there's that there. And finally, the publicly disclosed 0-day is CVE 2025-26630. This is a remote code execution flaw that's caused by a use after free memory bug in Microsoft Office Access. A user must be tricked in opening a specially crafted access file. This can be done through phishing or social engineering attacks, which we know are there as well. We'll get into Cisco. Avanti released patches. For the love of God, please patch up your Avanti. Please, for the love of God, for the love of all things sacred on this Wednesday, please do that. Please. 40 also released a bunch of security updates. So did Cisco and Broadcom, and we'll get into SAP here in just a minute. Let's get into Adobe. For their end, they're releasing fixes to at least 35 different security flaws in a wide range of their products. The Patch Tuesday rollout brought immediate attention to several high-severity bulletins documenting at least 9 security defects in Adobe Acrobat and Reader for Windows and Mac OS. The company flagged multiple critical severity issues, warning that successful exploitation could lead to arbitrary code execution and memory leaks. Adobe is also pushing users to prioritize an available security update for Adobe InDesign, warning that multiple critical and important security severity flaws could lead to memory leaks, arbitrary code execution, and application denial of service. Also, Adobe Substance 3D Sampler received a security makeover with patches for 7 documented flaws that could allow for a computer takeover. So you want to make sure you get those Adobes. And by the way, the Adobe patches are the easiest. I mean, those should be scheduled, push them out to the users, make sure they do them, reset the devices, send it out with an email, be done with it. Adobe is the easiest one to patch of anything. Enterprise Software Maker ERP program SAP on Tuesday also announcing the release of 21 new and 3 updated security notes as part of their March 2025 security patch day. There's 5 priority security notes in the advisory, 3 new notes that address vulnerabilities in Commerce NetWeaver and Commerce Cloud, and 2 updated notes that resolve flaws in the app router and PDCE. The most severe issues is CVEs 2025-27434 and 26661. Both have an 8.8 CVSS score, and they're described as cross-site scripting bug in Commerce and a missing authorization check in NetWeaver. The cross-site scripting issue resides in the open source library Swagger UI and could allow an unauthenticated attacker to inject malicious code if they convince a user to place a malicious payload into the input field, according to Anopsys. The NetWeaver was discovered in transaction SA38 and allows access to some restricted functionality. So you want to make sure you get these patched up. There's also 15 medium priority security nodes that resolve flaws in Business One, NetWeaver, Business Warehouse, Business Objects, Web Dispatcher, and Internet Communication Manager, S4HANA, Fiori apps, and Permit to Work. So if you're an SAP shop, you want to make sure you get that addressed as well. Joining us today on Patch Tuesday, welcome to the group Apple. Great to have you here with us. If you have an iPad or an iOS, you want to make sure you get up to the latest version, 18.3.2, resolving an urgent fix for a Webkit flaw that's already being exploited on older versions of the OS. The 0-day by Apple is tagged to CVE 2025-24201, and it does allow attackers to break out of the web content sandbox, and it may be exploited in an extremely sophisticated attack against targeted individuals. So spyware, it's exactly what they mean. This issue is a spyware issue, so you want to make sure you get this addressed. On the SCADA and ICS side, Siemens and Schneider Electric both issued some patches. Schneider published 3 new advisories informing customers about 3 vulnerabilities affecting the EcoStruxure products. The most serious is a critical issue in power automation system user interface and microgrid operation large that could be exploited by an attacker to execute commands when the default password has not changed. Siemens for their end published 11 new advisories, including several that describe critical vulnerabilities. One of them, CVE 2024-56336, is related to an unlocked bootloader in the Dynamic S200 servo drive system. It could allow an attacker to inject malicious code or install untrusted firmware on the device. The critical vulnerability has been patched in the CPAS controller, which can be exploited to escalate privileges and execute arbitrary commands with root permission. And a high-severity privilege escalation flaw has also been patched in the product. Several open VPN issues, including critical flaws that allow arbitrary code execution, has been addressed in the Cynama Remote Connect client. A less serious open VPN issue has been addressed in the Scalance devices as well. CISA published 2 ICS advisories on Tuesday for their end, one describing 3 vulnerabilities in the 2 Optigo network capture tools. They include a critical authentication bypass flaw and 2 high-severity issues that could allow an attacker to generate JWT sessions and impersonate the web application service and mislead victims. The second CISA advisory is Schneider Electric's unit teleway driver vulnerability, the vendor patched last month. And that kind of wraps up the generality of our Patch Tuesday today. Let's get to some stuff that I'm paying attention to as a practitioner. The first one coming from our friends over in North Korea, where they're now essentially using NPM packages. So those are not package managers linked to Lazarus as part of an attack. The 6 malicious packages in NPM were downloaded around 330 times. They're designed to steal account credentials, deploy backdoors on compromised systems, and extract sensitive cryptocurrency information. The Socket research team discovered the campaign, linked it to Lazarus. Likely, some people are pointing that this could have been the tactic they used over at the Bybit to gain initial access. That's not a far-fetched idea. And again, as you kind of start to unravel the onions and the layers of the attack, you start to discover more and more the supply chain there. Those 6 packages, by the way, are on your screen in front of you, but it is Buffer Validator, J Validator, Event Handler Package, Array Empty Validator, React Event Dependency, and Auth Validator. Those will all be available in our show notes at cyberhubpodcast.com. You can check if you've used them. 330 downloads. I doubt your organization was there, but it's definitely worthy of a check if you're using NPM Manager for anything there. A previously unidentified botnet is now infecting unpatched TP-Link Archer home routers. This is coming from Cato Network, saying during a recent investigation into some router vulnerabilities, they discovered that the botnet infecting TP-Link Archer routers, the attackers behind the malware, who believe is based in Italy, has been exploiting a firmware vulnerability tracked, a CVE 2023-1389er, that allows a botnet to spread itself automatically over the internet through some unpatched TP-Link devices. And we've got to be better at this. This is one of those things where I always say, you're selling home routers, and I get you don't care for security, fine, whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, we ought to have a better standard coming either from the ONCD, the Office of National Cyber Director, ONCD and Office of National Cyber Director, or CISA, saying like these got to be patched over the air, something along those lines. People are not going to patch their routers at home, not unless they're one of us, right? And to be one of us, you got to be crazy, because why would you want to do this? I mean, this job is really a beatdown almost every single day. I mean, I love it. No one's complaining here. But everyone here who in cybersecurity and as a practitioner understands the constant battles of the basics is really the biggest battle you do in cyber every single day on your job. And so that's one thing there. Ofek Vardy, the security engineer at Cato, said the 3 researchers are moderately confident that the attacker is based in Italy because of the IP address location for the C2 server and because of some Italian language strings found within the malware code. So likely kind of an up-and-coming Italian attacker there. We'll move to some news here from New York Attorney General Letitia James filing a lawsuit against insurance firm National General and its parent company Allstate over 2 different data breaches, one that happened in 2020 and another that happened in 2021. Essentially, the lawsuit, kind of to kind of break it down to you, is there were around I'd say 330,000 people impacted by this. So in the scheme of New York State, that's nothing, right? I mean, that's a subway ride. However, one of the reasons for the lawsuit here, and I don't know that I blame Letitia James for doing this, I think this is a warning shot, is the fact that they went through one data breach National General did before they were acquired. And then they went through another one, and apparently they never actually took any steps in remediation post-breach, which led to one breach after the other. And so Attorney General James is seeking penalties for National General's failure to institute reasonable data security safeguards and notify consumers, and an injunction to stop any continued violation. So back in the day, I wanted to be a lawyer, right? So I read that line, got me thinking, and not my current role, but my previous role, I reported to our general counsel. So these were the type of conversations we were having here. And we would have this conversation because reasonable data security safeguards is going to be how this fine is going to be determined. Now, I don't think this is going to get to the jury. I think this is going to be settled and negotiated, and that's a shame. Because I think the New York Attorney General here, who I'm not a fan of by any stretch of the imagination, may actually be able to do something that no one else has been able to do. And that is get a court to admit to a specific standard that would be considered legally to be reasonable data security safeguards, which would set a precedent, at which point you would say, if I'm not doing these 2, 5, 10, 15 things, then by any stretch, I'm not using reasonable data security safeguards. That precedent does not exist because rarely do these cases make it to trial. And this is the failure of cyber currently in our current system. So the current system is that the legislative branch isn't legislating what data security safeguards are. They typically go to NIST. NIST will say, you got to follow the NIST, but we're not really going to hold you to the NIST framework, right? And your regulatory body may say, we want you to audit and show us how well you're doing versus the NIST framework, whether it be 53, 171, whatever the case may be. And that's that. But there's no reasonable data security safeguards, right? PCI has reasonable standards. HIPAA has reasonable standards. Some of them do, but in this case, they don't, right? So you have that there. Now, if this goes to trial and a judge or a jury determine that reasonable data security safeguards are VPN, MDR, XDR, whatever, encryption, data security, SIM, SOAR, then you've got a legal precedent. At that point, that establishes a baseline. And I do sure hope that New York Attorney General Letitia James goes after them for that. So she's also alleging that they violated New York State's consumer protection laws by failing to properly secure the private data, that it misinterpreted its security practices, and that it failed to provide appropriate notification after the first breach was reported. This isn't the first lawsuit against Allstate. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton also filed a lawsuit for unlawfully collecting, using, and selling the data of 45 million Americans. So there's that there. And finally, it appears that we can now say CISA has a new head. Now, Sean Planke has been nominated by President Donald Trump, and his nomination has been sent to the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee for official consideration. Sean is a true cybersecurity professional. I think this is a actual good thing. So Sean he was the former acting assistant secretary for the Office of Cybersecurity, Energy, Security, and Emergency Response at the Department of Energy. He was the director of Maritime and Pacific Cybersecurity Policy at the National Security Council during Trump's first administration from 2018 to 2020. Planke is a Coast Guard veteran, also deployed in Afghanistan in 2013 in his role as the Weapon and Tactic Branch Chief at the U.S. Cyber Command. He's earned a Bronze Star for his work conducting offensive cyber operations during his time there, serving as a deputy officer in charge of the expeditionary cyber support element. Planke, until last month, worked as a general manager and global head of cybersecurity software for Indigo Vault, a post-quantum encryption document protection platform. He has not commented on his nomination, but I can tell you it's great to see this nomination. I think I was a bit weary on jitters waiting to see who would lead CISA. Sean is definitely capable of doing that. His experience, he's got the knowledge, and he's also got the relationships within the folks at the White House in order to drive some real cyber security change. I'm really excited about it. And I hope you are too. His success is our success. A friend of the show, Mark Montgomery, and former executive of the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, said he had worked with Planky extensively on maritime and called him a great hire with a broad range of government experience and some private experience, which will come in really handy to continue the good work Jen Easterly built with the private sector while really driving forward policy. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern, hopefully live from our studio. Until then, have a great rest of your day. And most importantly, y'all, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.